Hello and welcome to an edition of the Manchester is Red podcast. Recording this on the Friday ahead of United's trip to Merseyside and Goodison Park to face Everton on Sunday. Start of an away triple header next week. Samuel Luckhurst is joining me, who will be following United to Merseyside, Tyneside and Istanbul next week. How are you, Samuel, ahead of your busy week?
Yeah, it could be a book in itself from Merseyside to Tyneside, like the defining 7 days of United season. But yes, I need the energy levels, I think, ahead of the upcoming week. But looking forward to it. I think it's going to be pretty fascinating covering United.
It's going to be a very interesting week, I think. That is fair to say. We'll start off today with a story that Samuel did a couple of days ago or yesterday, I think. I can't remember now. They all merge into one.
I can't either on these international weeks.
Another squad clear out planned. It feels like every transfer window United plan a squad clear out and then don't quite go through with it fully. What sort of the details of this one? What are we expecting to happen?
Well, United have told us as well, like ad nauseum now, that with the profitability and sustainability rules, they are under more pressure to sell players. And I think that probably accounted for why a lot of academy players were just told, yeah, you can go, whereas yesteryear they'd have probably gone out for a loan move. And I thought that was the right way of going about it. If there's a player who's clearly not going to make it, there's no sense in keeping them unless you see a loan pathway where their valuation is going to increase, and there's no guarantee of that whatsoever. I mean, Zidane Iqbal probably deserved a bit more playing time for United, but he's ended up at Utrecht and I think he's barely had a kick there. I know he had an injury, but I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting him to go there and tear it up in the Eredivisie or what have you, but they got a pretty minuscule fee for him. And I suppose the scrutiny on United now in terms of the sellers market is, although they did sell or got rid of a lot of players in the summer, they didn't get a lot of money for it. And even looking ahead to next year, the players that you're looking at in terms of could they get good fees for them, they're very few and far between. But already you're looking at that squad, and of course there are going to be changes at hierarchical level with Ineos about to have their minority stake ratified, and they're going to have influence as well. Otherwise they wouldn't be getting involved. But you just go from the goalkeeper situation. Tom Heaton's going to be 38 at the start of next season. I think he was quite keen to, if the opportunity arose to go and play in the summer. He had some opportunities there, but United didn't let him go. But he's out of contract. I think even if he was offered a new contract, I'm not necessarily sure would he want it. But is there going to be a playing opportunity elsewhere? Either way, you don't necessarily see him at United next season. Johnny Evans is going to be 36 in January. That seemed like a short-term arrangement. It's worked out reasonably well for him. I think he's performed quite respectably for United. But with new people coming in, are they going to be of the mindset that, yes, we need to keep Johnny Evans next year? Probably not. United also want a new centre-half. And the centre-half issue is really, it's quite fluid there in that I'd say Martinez is the only one who's absolutely certain of being at United next season. Something has got to give with Varane and Maguire. Varane will have 1 year left in his contract next year. With a lot of players, it's getting to the point now where the +1 option is almost feeling like an irrelevance. Like with Rafael Varane, he'd have to be really solidly good for a 12 to 18 month period, I think, for United to even consider triggering the extension on. I think he might be 32 when he's come to the end of his contract, and they've got the +1 option. Victor Lindelof is going to be technically out of contract in the summer, but I think it's safe to say that they will trigger the extension because they need to protect their resale value. And in doing that, they have to ask themselves a question: are we going to give this guy who's 30 next year a new contract? I don't think any United fan would say, yeah, give Victor Lindelof a new contract based on his 6.5 years at the club. At which point you think, well, do we have to sell him next year? And if he's going, you'd probably get a reasonable fee for him still if he's playing relatively regularly, and you want to bring a new centre-half in. So that is logical. And with Maguire, I think he's done really well this season, given the starting point and the resilience he's shown. I know the bar is very low, but there's an argument that he's been United's player of the season so far. But still, you don't know what the situation is going to be there in 4, 5 or 6 months' time, whether he'll still be playing regularly or whether his form will have tailed off. His performance for England in the week was a reminder that when he does make a lapse, it's a pretty catastrophic lapse, and he was quite fortunate to not give a penalty away. Midfield, Eriksen and Casemiro, they're both 32 in February. There's already a bit of noise about would they look to try and get rid of Casemiro next year just because his form has fallen off the edge of a cliff and he's injured, and he looked off it before he got injured as well. Eriksen will only have 1 year left in his contract. They're going to need a new midfielder next year. Scott McTominay, similarly to Maguire, he's done well, but is that sustainable in the long run? Is he going to be playing regularly for United? Is it good for United that he's playing regularly? Probably not, just because of the level they aspire to be at. They need an upgrade there, and they've been trying that for as long as McTominay's been in the first team. But credit to him, he always finds a way of getting back into the fold. Amrabat would have to play like an absolute demon over the next 6 months for United, for Ineos, for whoever the new director of football, as we expect one to come in, to say, yes, we will trigger that €20 million payment to make it permanent. I mean, it was a €10 million loan fee. To invest €30 million in a player who has really, really been quite poor and looks out of his depth and has lost his place and not started the last 4 or 5 games, that looks a stretch. And then the attack, they've got 13 goals in 12 Premier League games. This really does have to be Marshall's final season. I think unless there's a drastic turn of events, they've got to release him or even consider selling him in the January transfer window, because I think that is an area where they need to look at an income in a new goal scorer coming in. And that's without mentioning Sancho's persona non grata, who they've absolutely got to try and get off the books in January, and also Donny van der Beek, who's a complete irrelevance there. And that's just like the first team pool. And then you think of the academy and players who've either stagnated or it might feel like not long ago they were 16 or 17 and now suddenly they're 20 or 21 and time has passed them by and their opportunity has really frankly come and gone. Shola Shortiri, Joe Hugel had a bad injury and he looks quite ungainly when he plays for United, whether it's in a friendly or for the reserves, and it just doesn't. As the way they've gone about operating this summer, it was just that there's no sense in keeping those players next year. You always need, of course, you need players to be able to put a team out in the under-23s and the under-18s, but there are a number of players at that level where you think, well, they're clearly not going to cut it at United, they're not going to get an opportunity. Occasionally we see them in training, as we've seen this week, like Jack Fletcher's already been training with the first team, but that is literally because they need the numbers. You've got all these players scattered across various continents on international duty. Their participation in first team training is an anomaly. And I've probably rattled through in terms of naming players who should go next year, and that's gone into double figures. So already that has to constitute a clear out. And most of those players, they've either played for the first team or they've had some form of first team exposure in pre-season and friendlies. And it's just also the fact that the team are not doing well, and they are going to need improvements in just about almost every area next year, you would imagine.
Yeah, you would think so. And I mean, January is the upcoming window. So if we focus on January for now, it's probably one where departures will dominate. I mean, just thinking off the top of my head, you're looking. I mean, Donny van der Beek will surely go in January. He's not in the Champions League squad. He can't get a kick in the Premier League. Jadon Sancho will have to go, you would think. I can't. It's hard to envisage a scenario where he doesn't now. Maybe Varane. I mean, Varane must be incredibly disappointed / bemused to find himself behind Maguire, Lindelof and Evans in that team.
I think that must have been his reaction, that Harry Maguire taking his place as well this season.
I mean, the moment Ten Hag described picking Johnny Evans ahead of him for the derby as tactical, must have felt that something was up here with Varane, and I guess there's a possibility there of 3 fairly big name departures, even if at least 2 of them in Van der Beek and Sancho are basically irrelevant at the moment anyway.
Yeah, I think centre half, they can't really be looking to. unless a great offer comes in for a player, they can't be looking to proactively get rid of anyone there because they've had injury issues. They've still got injury issues there. Evans is out for a couple more weeks, I think it is. Excuse me. Varane is brittle. Martinez might not play again this year. So going into January, that department, you're likely to have 4 available centre-halves at best. One's about to turn 36, had injury issues last year at Leicester. Varane is 30, and we all know how brittle he is. Those 2 players, I think, in Evans and Varane, it seems like they can only play once a week. I mean, Ten Hag tried to force it out of Evans by keeping him in the team against Copenhagen, having started and completed the game against Fulham about, I think it was four days earlier, and he lasted 15 minutes. I mean, that can't be a long-term arrangement. Johnny Evans has probably played more than he thought he would do in the entire season for United, just because of a number of factors. And as I said, I think by and large he's done quite well, but I think people will remember his season so far as much as for his impressive performance at Burnley as what happened against City in the derby, and just how that selection backfired and it's not panned out. It didn't pan out on that night. But as I said earlier, I mean, Sancho, he's not even getting talked about at press conferences now because everybody just accepts that there's not going to be a Lazarus-like return. I mean, Bastian Schweinsteiger, when he was literally, as an investment, he was written out of the accounts when Mourinho put him in the reserve, made him train with the reserves. But by this point, he had been reintegrated back into the first team squad, and Mourinho had held his hands up and accepted he felt as though he'd made an error. But that's not going to happen with Sancho. United have had a long time as well. I mean, what was it? September the 3rd when it all kicked off over that. And we're into, I was off, but you were doing the stories about how United were clearly open to shifting him to a Saudi club if the arrangement was right, while that window was still open. Didn't quite happen. So they'll have had, 4 or 5 months to have something prepared for him, and his agent has got to have had something prepared for him as well. It would be a massive failing on United's part if, come the end of January, Sancho is still there, and it won't be good for anyone either. It won't reflect well on him or his agent if they fail to get a move. It won't reflect well on United that they're tolerating this situation where a player is training in a separate building, where, as you wrote in your piece not that long ago, where he has to lock the door because of safeguarding issues, because there are young teenagers training on getting changed on the premises as well. It's just not good for anyone. It can't be good for Sancho's mental well-being as well, the way it's going. But look, it's all on him, the way he reacted to Ten Hag's response to my question, and he's clearly not been contrite about it, and he's done for at United. And I suppose the only thing he's maybe looking at is if there's a change of manager, his situation could change. But I don't think any of us, hopefully, Christmas is coming and we don't want too much of a workload, but I don't think any of us are anticipating a managerial change anytime soon. I don't think there should be at United. And Van der Beek, he is so bad that he's a Dutchman at United who doesn't get privileges from the man who seems to favour players who've been developed in the Eredivisie. And the fact that it was almost 2 years ago that he left for Everton that January on loan because he wasn't getting a kick under Solskjaer, and his situation has actually got worse at United. He's been a write-off, and that's the way it's going, because if he's still at the club in the summer, he's got 1 year left in his contract, and he is one player who they are certainly they can't trigger the extension unless all of a sudden he starts to resemble a very good footballer at Premier League level. But I think looking at the body of evidence so far, there's absolutely no chance of that happening. So he is one of those players, as you said, where he's not in the Champions League squad, where I think he's been selected in 5 of the 18 matchday squads this season. He's played 20 minutes. You have got to just get a shot of him in January. There's got to be someone out there that will take him. And also these players, not so much Sancho, because I don't think he's got a chance of getting back into the England squad, maybe for the rest of his career, unfortunately. But you look at how underwhelming the Dutch team is, and Wout Weghorst is starting for them. If Van der Beek gets a move, plays regularly, you've got to think there's an outside chance of him making the squad for the Euros. And I'd also apply that to Marshall as well. I think that they've got to look to get rid of Marshall, just because that gives you the leverage to bring the striker in.
Yeah, you mentioned before no change of manager expected. There is a change of partial ownership expected.
Oh yes.
I mean, there has been for a year now, but it has still not happened.
It was the anniversary the other day.
It was the anniversary on Wednesday. Yes, I had a lovely cake to celebrate. It's incredible. It's still going on. Another week has passed by without confirmation of what we all know to be happening with Ineos's 25% stake. I mean, when do we expect that to happen, and what is the latest there? Because a lot of these, we've spent this part discussing transfers in the January transfer window. A lot of those decisions will be conditioned by whoever Ineos have in charge then, given they are essentially overseeing the footballing department.
Yeah, the word now is that it will be next week. The expectation was that it was going to be during the November internationals, which would have commemorated the anniversary quite nicely, given that that's when the story first and the communications department put out that statement last year about United being up for sale. It was just before the World Cup was about to begin. I was told that there were still a few things being finalised and what have you, and unless there was things got done quicker than expected, it will now be next week. I think the New York Stock Exchange also is closed for Thanksgiving, which just took place in America. We're recording this on Friday. Thanksgiving is the last Thursday of November, I think it is.
I think.
So it was yesterday. So the New York Stock Exchange is closed for that holiday. And when it reopens, the expectation now is that there will be a statement on it next week, which is not ideal for me when I'm flying to Istanbul, and there's a extremely important game for United to cover in the middle of next week as well. But maybe that's the good news to counter their possible Champions League elimination on Wednesday. Maybe that's the way they're going about it.
That could be it. Yeah, well,
I don't think that will necessarily lift the mood too much, but. However, we could do a whole podcast on the communications department and our various misgivings about certain things.
Yeah, why are you still thinking about the bad news? There is good news here.
Yeah.
Well, that could well be the strategy next week. That is all for part one of the Manchester is Red podcast. We'll be back after the break to look ahead to the trip to Goodison Park. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. United begin their week-long away day odyssey on Merseyside on Sunday. A trip to Goodison Park, a place where the atmosphere can be hit and miss, I think it's fair to say. We both did United's 1-0 win there under Ranić. Everton's 1-0 win there under Ranić, and until Everton scored that day, it felt like the place was going to explode in fury at the Everton team, and somehow they were being worshipped an hour later. But I think it's fair to say the atmosphere come 4:30 p.m. on Sunday is going to be intense. They feel like a football club scorned this week, don't they, after what's happened with the Premier League. It's made a tricky trip for United even harder, I guess, because the fans are going to be furious. The players have got an obvious motivation. Sean Dyche's team talk is done for itself. It's going to be a collectively furious Everton on and off the pitch, isn't it?
I was really looking forward to this game before that announcement last week, and I'm looking forward to it even more now. It might also be the last time I go to Goodison Park to cover a football match, depending on when the Bramley Moore Dock Stadium gets opened. I think that it might not necessarily be ready for the start of next season, but I think the way people at Everton say you should phrase it is that this is going to be the last full season at Goodison Park. So they might kick off next season there, but United have been at some stadium closures in recent years as well, West Ham and Tottenham. So if they could have arranged it to have been United, I think it would have gone down well. But getting back to the matter at hand, Everton have been in pretty good form as well. I think they've won 6 of their last 9. Yeah. Only lost 1 or 2, was it? I think they had a bad defeat against Luton. The Liverpool defeat, I think it was reasonably palatable because there was, one particularly bad decision in that game where Konate should have been sent off. He wasn't, and that had big, that had a big bearing on the final result. And Everton, let's face it, they never win at Anfield when there's a crowd present. The only time they did win there was during the pandemic. But as you alluded to, I love going to Goodison, but and it can produce a febrile atmosphere. But in covering United in recent years, you've not got that, or I've certainly not heard it. I'm sure it was. I wasn't at the Moyes game when Everton won the up, and they probably should have qualified for the Champions League that season under Roberto Martinez. But in recent years, like going back to that Rangnick game, Everton fans were clearly looking to pick a fight, primarily with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who it just seemed like whenever the ball went near him, they were willing him to not keep it or make an error just so they could turn on him. And it's, I suppose, a little bit similarly to Newcastle before they became sports washers. They've had hope extracted from them at Everton in that they've had all these managerial changes. Mashiri's investment has made them a worse team, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like they've got an identity. They've reconnected with the fan base. It's a period of upheaval where a lot of fans are saying goodbye to Goodison Park as well. But with this 10-point deduction that they've been hit with, which although they've clearly broken the rules and a punishment had to be meted out, there is inconsistency there, and it does feel like the Premier League are borderline bullying one of the. I mean, Everton aren't a small club, but they're not a particularly successful club, and it will be fascinating to see how the Premier League deal with City and their 115 charges. And also you go back to the betrayal of the Super League, and those clubs got away relatively scot-free with that. I know they paid a fine, but I think the outlook from the Premier League now is that fines don't cut it with football clubs who've got owners worth tens, some of them hundreds of millions, some of them billions. But it's, as we said before about United and away form, this is a really, really testing period, and Goodison's is an ideal warm-up act for Istanbul. I suspect it won't be half as loud as it will be at Galatasaray Stadium on Wednesday, but United need to recalibrate away from home, as we were discussing yesterday. You said if they win any of these 3 away games, it will be their best away win under Ten Hag, because you're thinking what's been the standout away win under him, and it's maybe a last-minute winner at Fulham this season or last, but has there been a good performance along the way of in those wins? Probably not. The best performance I've seen from United away from home under Ten Hag was in Barcelona, where they could have won it, and they've really got to. You only have to look at their form this season. They've won 9, they've lost 9, and that's not going to. I mean, the way they're going about it is just not sustainable if they want to have a successful season. And Everton, as you said, they will be well up for it. I think it's in the 10th minute that they're preparing to, chant some expletives about the Premier League, and it's been suggested that Sky are going to try and drown out the crowd noise, which I think is absolutely pathetic. If you're covering at a football match, there's going to be industrial language, so trying to censor it it's just risible. It's just such a sanitized way of going about trying to protect a product, and very manufactured. But hopefully Everton fans are heard loud and clear. And as I said earlier, I just think this is a fascinating week ahead for United, and to cover it, there's going to be a hell of a lot to write about. And I certainly don't think that the game on Sunday will be uneventful either. No,
I mean, presumably they will win at least 2, maybe 3 of these games, given that Ten Hag said this week that their away record is very good. Within an interview pre-match with beIN Sports. 3 wins, 4 defeats away from home this season. 2 of those wins against teams heading back to the Championship, the other in the last minute at Fulham. I mean, you could say they started well at Tottenham, they started well at Bayern, they played well at Copenhagen, played relatively well at Arsenal. They did lose all of those games.
Yeah. And conceded
a lot of goals. Yeah. I mean, it's. I know a manager's always going to try and sugarcoat disappointments and things like that, but I mean, that away record is not very good, is it? It's, if anything, maybe it's not very bad, but it's poor, isn't it?
Yeah, it's poor. Factually, it is not very good unless you were to say in the Premier League they've had 5 away games and they've won the majority of them. I still wouldn't constitute that as very good, winning 3, losing 2. The 2 defeats coming at competitors as well. And as you said, I think the Arsenal game, they gave a better account of themselves there than they did at the Emirates last season. I think they were quite fortunate to lose 3-2 and lose quite narrowly in that January game. They didn't have much about them. I thought they had a lot more about them in the game in September. Spurs away, they were good in the first half. Second half, there wasn't a single positive about that 45-minute performance. It was really, really poor. And I suppose the Bayern Munich result and the way it panned out, it's a reflection of how, although United are a big club, how little they can feel at times, in that they came away from it thinking like, we went down with a fight, conceding 4 goals to Bayern Munich, and we kept on getting back in it.
Bayern could have scored 8.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, Bayern Munich, just like as soon as United got near them, Bayern Munich would just push them off again, like a father with his toddler who's trying to get at him when he's having a tantrum or something like that. They were just powerless to do anything against them. And I think going into that game, certainly with the injury issues and United's form, it always felt like it was going to be a question of how many. And it was almost seen as a success that United lost by 1 goal that evening. The Copenhagen game is the best they've played all season for a number of reasons. I mean, we talk about United dealing with crowds, and the fact that it was loud and raucous that night didn't bother them whatsoever. And that first goal was, as a member of staff at the club was cooing. He was still cooing about it a few days later. Like that's the Manchester United under Erik ten Hag that we want, and it was a great goal. That we don't get monitors at these European grounds, annoyingly, but you didn't need it to appreciate it. It was just such a well-constructed team goal with so many laudable elements to it. But that feels an anomaly. United don't play that way often enough, but that evening they did play well, yet they still capitulated in each half and ended up conceding 4 goals and losing the third of their 4 Champions League group games. So I can imagine there are a lot of fans will be going to these 3 games over the next week or so, and I can't imagine there's a great deal of expectation or hope that United are going to win. I hesitate to say any of them, because I do think they'll probably nick a win at one of them, but really for it to be a successful period, they need to be taking between 6 to 9 points, and that does feel like a tall order with a team that does not score many goals and has conceded a lot of goals away from home this season, and their defeats have come against the poorest teams, some of the poorest teams in the Premier League. Fulham were very good last season. This season they look a very, very average and pretty toothless team, given that they sold Alexander Mitrovic, and they've not adequately replaced him with anyone remotely good enough or threatening enough up front.
Yeah, and Everton, like we say, are in a false position in 19th, given that points deduction. 6 wins in 9, they are scoring goals. I mean, United have actually there's been some pretty dark days there. The 4-0 on Easter Sunday under Solskjaer, the 1-0 under Ranić, but they've actually got a decent record against Everton, haven't they? That 1-0 under Ranić, I think, is their only defeat in 10 now against Everton. They won all 3.
Oh, overall?
Overall, home and away. They won all 3 against them last year, so there's hope there that they've got a decent record. But we will look more ahead to that game in the third part, including, as Samuel just touched on, who exactly is going to score the goals if Manchester United are to win any of these games. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. We are looking ahead to United's trip to Everton on Sunday. We've said this is a difficult week for United, that winning one of these games would probably be reasonably successful given their form away from home. I mean, if they are to win one, they need to score a goal. Forgive me for pointing out the obvious. With Rasmus Højlund out, they're going to play a front 3 who have 3 goals in 47 games, presuming it's Garnacho, Martial and Rashford, or 2 in 44 if Anthony comes back in. I mean, I was looking yesterday at who's been United's match winners this season, and I think it's been Fernandes 3 times. Then after that, it's been McTominay, Dalot, Lindelof, Maguire,
Varane,
and Varane, which seems pretty unsustainable, really. I mean, that's of their 9 wins, a forward hasn't won them a single game yet.
Rashford's the only forward who's scored in the league, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was on September the 3rd. So it's the lack of form of those forwards is pretty dire, really. United did say they hoped Højlund would be back by the end of this month, so maybe for Istanbul, maybe for Newcastle. I mean, we're recording this before Ten Hag's press conference, so we will have an update on that on the website later, but he didn't train, so probably Marshall to come in for him. I mean, to put it bluntly, where are the goals going to come from, Samuel?
Well, this is the paradox with Anthony Marshall. He's a player that you, in however many games it's possible to play in world football, if he's playing for your club, you wouldn't want him starting. But if there's one team that you wouldn't mind him starting against, it's Everton, because they are his patsies. Everton, his record against Everton is so good that the one season he only scored 1 goal for United. It was against Everton. Even last season, where he missed more than half the games at Goodison, where he went off injured, he still got an assist, and in the reverse fixture he came on and he scored. A few seasons ago, when he got what was it? I think 9 goals that season, like a really poor, or 7 goals, however many it was. He scored against Everton. There's only one Everton manager during Marshall's time at United who has come away from a game against United where Marshall's not scored, and that was Frank Lampard. And you think of the managers who've come up against Marshall: Martinez, Koeman, Marco Silva, Sam Allardyce, Sean Dyche, obviously now, I'm probably missing one out, Carlo Ancelotti. They've all put teams out, different players, and Marshall has still managed to score against them. So, I mean, Everton have been his patsies, and I remember in his first game against them, United had a bad recent record at Goodison. They'd lost their last 3 there, and it was after the internationals, and there wasn't a great deal of hope going into it. It was the day that Howard Kendall died, so it was quite a sombre atmosphere at Goodison, and United, much to everyone's amazement, played really well and won 3-0. And Marshall was excellent against Seamus Coleman, and I'd say up until that point, Coleman had been one of the best right backs in the Premier League in the last for about 2 or 3 years, but he's never quite looked the same. Watching him, and he, just even Marshall's mere presence, it feels like it forced the mistake that he made against United at Old Trafford in April. And that first game Marshall had against Everton, he was exceptional. And then of course later that season he got the winning goal at Old Trafford in the league, and then a few weeks later he got the winner in the cup semi-final right at the death as well against them. So ever since he's come up against them, he just seems to have the hex over Everton. But this is a very different Anthony Marshall that at the start of last season, when he was having these games, he seemed to be having an effect in all of them. But now people are just, United fans cheered him off when he was removed against Newcastle the other week. He's had 4 starts this season. I mean, I've completely forgot that he started against Forest and Arsenal back in late August and early September, and he did next to nothing in those games, and that probably had contributed to Jadon Sancho's outburst as well, because I think there was certainly a reasonable argument at the time that with Højlund still not fit and Rashford not a striker after starting there in the first 2 games, that Sancho should have occupied that role, given that he'd played there in pre-season. But Ten Hag wanted the number 9, and I suppose the irony with Marshall is that he's actually been fit for the entirety of this season. I don't think he's even been injured at any point. I think he's been available. He might have been in literally every squad, which is an achievement itself given how injury prone he's been in recent years. But nobody sees him as the future of United. I mean, Andy Cole was on punditry duty for the Newcastle game, and he's pretty much a de facto club ambassador at United and has been for a while. And he didn't sugarcoat it with Marshall. He said he's got 89 goals, he's into his 9th season. That is nowhere near enough for a number 9. Is he a number 9 to take United back to where they want to be? No. And if you disagree with that assessment, then you're either related to Marshall or you're not right in the head, probably. So as I said earlier, whether he, regardless if he scores a hat trick or is completely anonymous on Sunday, this has got to be his final season and maybe his final year at United, because I think there's a compelling case that they've got to certainly seek a buy for him in January, because that is realistically the last window they have to sell him.
Yeah, I mean, despite the similarities in our name and the sub-editor's attempt to turn me into Tyrone Marshall on a couple of occasions in this newspaper, we are not related. And yeah, I mean, arguably you'd just release him on a free, wouldn't you? His record's that bad now. I think last season was probably his last chance, and I thought for the first half of last season he was influencing games.
Yeah.
But it's typical of Martial that it can just disappear like that, and it's gone again, and it's clearly gone again at the moment. And if we're sitting here a week on Monday analysing those 3 away games, and we're still talking about out of form forwards, it's probably been a bad week for United, hasn't it? This is the week they really need someone to step up and take some responsibility now, whether it's Rashford, whether it is Martial. I mean, Fernandes will probably have to win one of these games. You feel like he's not been brilliant this season, but he's still winning games for United. He's, in a way, he's exempt from the general criticism here, and we're not including him in that front three. But someone needs to be a hero basically this week, don't they?
The Fulham game, I said to a friend afterwards, like Fernandes has been so bad. He's got the winning goal, and he has done that loads of times in his United career. Even in his first year at United, he'd be performing like a drain, but he'd get the winning goal or he'd create the winning goal. And at Fulham, I think I said to Rich doing the ratings, I said I had him down as a 4 and he's been bumped up to 7 because he's got the last minute winner. And yeah, it was a goalkeeping error as well, but he showed good composure to shift the ball, and I think he deceived a couple of players to open up the gap and get the shot off. And he's got 3 winning goals this season. He probably should have had another winning goal in Copenhagen, but for Dalot dozing off, and then the collapse happened, and United go from what would have been an uplifting win to a pretty demoralising defeat. Ten Hag said in that interview about the number of players they've got who can score goals, but it just feels like we're hearing the same things from him, and that's been one of the frustrations about covering a club as a journalist. When things aren't going well, the manager does have a tendency to repeat himself, and you have to be a bit cannier with the way you phrase questions, because it's very easy. It is actually quite easy to anticipate what he's going to say in response to a certain question. So you have to think on your feet sometimes. And he was mentioning these names, but and saying that the forwards will click, etc. But you can't just rest on your laurels. And unfortunately, there are some of these players that he's naming. They're not reliable. Anthony had a very modest goal scoring record for Ajax before United invested 100 million euros to make him their prime right winger. Garnacho has got the odd goal, but as we saw again against Luton 2 weeks ago, he's prone to losing his composure. And he's been in identical. I can remember he's been in identical positions at that end of the ground with similar chances. Leeds at home last season springs to mind, and also Burnley at home in the League Cup, where he's in a 1-on-1 situation and he overthinks it, or he doesn't. There's just not a natural finisher's instinct about him, and you can. I think it's more forgivable with him because he's a 19-year-old, and you've got to still coach that composure into him, and he's got to learn, how to be more clinical in those situations. But you can say it's going to click for Rashford, but how do you know it's going to click for Rashford? He's got 1 goal in 16 games, and he had a good chance against Luton, and the first touch was poor. I think the way he tried to control it, getting his studs on it, and then the ball rolled under it, hit his boot, but the shot was still on, but the shot was pretty much straight at the keeper. And Rashford's performance level all season, it's just been really poor. I think the thing with Højlund that has been really, it's given United fans some comfort is that his goal scoring record in the Champions League is really good, and he is getting chances. I mean, people might say, oh, he's been unfortunate in the Premier League, but he's like, I can think of 3 good chances against Palace, 3 good chances against Sheffield United. There was the opportunity against City where I think his naivety really did show in that situation when he didn't get the run right and he didn't try and draw the foul or win the penalty or get John Stones sent off. And against Luton, he had 2 outstanding chances as well. So that's about 8 or 9 really good opportunities in 8 starts and 1 substitute appearance for United. So he's had the opportunities. And I think there's only so much slack you can cut him. So I thought during the Luton game, that was not a high pressure stakes game. It's a 3:00 kickoff. It's a promoted team. It's probably the most ill-equipped team to have come up to the Premier League. It's not like the eyes of the world are on that game. And he still felt the pressure. And in a way, you expect it because of his age and because of the transfer fee and the fact that he's leading the line for United, age 20, having been at Copenhagen and moved to Sturm Graz not even 2 years ago for next to nothing. But nobody is there to alleviate the burden on him. And when it is someone alleviating the burden on him, it's someone, just it's something out of nothing. It's a defender getting a winning goal, or it's Fernandes having to do what he's done quite often for United since he joined the club. But that is just utterly unsustainable. And I'm not convinced when Ten Hag talks about the players who they've got who can score goals. Marshall has broken the 20-goal barrier in 1 season at United, and he's a number 9. Rashford's broken the 20-goal barrier, I think, in 3 seasons, which is reasonable going, but it's not. He got 30 goals last season. At the moment, he's got fewer goals than that season where he ended up with 5 goals, which is a real worry. Højlund is not a proven goal scorer. Antony is not a proven goal scorer. Garnacho isn't as well. Fernandes will chip in with goals and probably hit double figures just because of how often and how present he is and his tendency to get big goals as well. But it's just not. It's not like you look at other teams where you think, yeah, he'll chip in and he'll get 10 goals without even anyone really noticing. United just don't have that luxury, and it's borne out in the Premier League table. 13 goals in 12 games. If that doesn't constitute a reinforcement in January, and I'm not talking about some guy from the Netherlands who got a couple of good goals in a World Cup. I don't know what does, but who that answer may be, I'm not sure either. That's not my job. No,
we'll have a look where Odion Ighalo is and see what we can drum up. In terms of team selection for the weekend, then midfield probably feels the most interesting in a way, given Eriksen's absence, Casemiro's ongoing absence. McTominay seems to be flavour of the month again and starting. Fernandes will start. Is it a case of one from Amrabat and Mount, do you think? And I mean, surely it has to be Mason Mount, doesn't it? Given the pressure on Ten Hag to make a success of this transfer.
Well, that's you'd maybe argue that Amrabat, McTominay is a bit more compatible and combative for a game against Everton. I mean, Everton will probably have Garner, Onana and Doucouré ahead of them. I mean, that's quite a. I mean, Garner's pretty lightweight, but the other two are extremely physical, and this is a game that they need. I mean, McTominay's probably one of the first names on the team sheet, but Amrabat has not been starting, and again, his only good game for United was at left back against a Palace team who hit the eject button themselves in the League Cup. That's how unfussed they were about that. The bold move would, I mean, you've not mentioned him, but Kobbie Mainoo, but I don't think there's a cat and hell's chance he's getting chucked in at the deep end at Goodison Park. I'd kind of like him to, in a way. It'd be good to see if he would, really relish that opportunity, but I suspect Ten Hag will go for the more experienced options in midfield. But with Mason Mount, I don't think it's a certainty that he comes into this team. I mean, going back to the last international break, of course he wasn't in the England squad, and you thought, well, Sheffield United, that's a bit of creativity needed. He'll come into the team then, and he didn't, because he played so abysmally against Brentford in the previous game. You couldn't blame Ten Hag for saying, I'm going with these choices instead. I think it was McTominay and Amrabat who started in that one. And okay, Amrabat has been away on international duty for Morocco, and sometimes that does have a bearing on team selections in terms of the air miles clocked up and how many training sessions a player's had, and Mount has been there all week. But the problem is, when I see him, I don't see a midfielder. And where do you play him? You don't play him in Fernandez's role. They've tried him on the right. I still think it's maybe worth having another go there, but I suspect that Rashford and Garnacho would be the logical way forward with that, even though Rashford by all accounts, didn't have the greatest of times with England across their 2 games, although I don't think too many players in England colours and had a great time in those 2 unwatchable matches against Malta and North Macedonia. But it's almost it's a question that you've got to ask of United. Why is it that in a summer that 5 prominent England players get major transfers, and one is possibly the best player in the world now, the other's probably the best goal scorer or striker in the world, one's been the best player in the Premier League this season, James Maddison at Spurs, Declan Rice has been one of the best players in the Premier League for Arsenal. Why is it the one who goes to Man United and gets the number 7 shirt can't influence games, is dropped and is bombed out the England squad? I don't think Mount was essentially, it was what United needed, but clearly there is a fundamental problem with United as a football club and a structure, and with the whole decision-making strategy, that things get that bad that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they signed the wrong player, essentially, for the role required. Which is a major failing. And finally, just to finish on Samuel, we'll save the worst, the X-rated part until last. You've done your player ratings of the season so far this morning. Hopefully the players haven't read it. Not a great confidence boost heading into the weekend. But I mean, it's to
maybe
be
that's
expected.
what Ten Hag should do. Just put them up, pin it up on the wall, and say, "Show that."
Yeah. And if they win, we'll send you down to the mix zone on Sunday. And
yes, that would be interesting.
But I mean, it's the truth, basically, isn't it? This has been for the majority of players. This has been a pretty disastrous season so far.
I know. I had a discussion with my editor about it because she took umbrage with 1 rating, and I had to convince her, no, I think it's got to be that harsh, because and it was Rashford, and I said, look, he's 1 goal in 16 games, and it's not like he's been playing well or getting chances or having an influence on matches. He, unfortunately for him, he was cheered off. What game was it again? It was definitely, was it City? Oh, it was City. It was City. And of course that night he went out still to his birthday party in the city centre, which was never going to be a good look. Just really very naive from someone who's actually very experienced. But yeah, in terms of the ratings, I think I only gave 7 to, which was to Maguire. I'm not sure. With McTominay, I was thinking 6 or 7. I mean, obviously, he gave United fans the season high against Brentford, and he's done well to get back in the team. But there haven't been many games where I've thought, he really properly played well. I mean, I think he's performed at a reasonably consistent, decent level, but I've not been massively impressed with him. But you have to factor in that, given the starting point for him at the start of the season, he's done well to get back into the team. I think Onana got a 6 because although there have been howlers in recent weeks, his form has picked up and he's looked more secure, even though United are still, the way they play, they're not exactly maximising his distribution. I think Johnny Evans got a 6 because he's done pretty respectably. Fernandez got a 6 because he's got some winners, but he's not been playing well. And I mean, the criteria is, I think Rich said on one of the podcasts while I was away, he said that 6 is almost the starting point. That is, you've not done much right, you've not done much wrong, but that's okay. If it's 5 or under, things have not been going well. And I mean, Dalot could have maybe been marked down a little bit more, but he did get a winning goal, so I gave him 5. But I'm sure there'll be some fans who think he should have been worse. But the worst mark assigned was to Anthony, just because he's literally not played well this season, and I think I just think of him shaking his head during the derby because he's not coming on. I'm thinking the gall to have that attitude when you've been performing the way you have been. Mount, Amrabat and Rashford were the twos, just because they're experienced players. Two of them have come in and have been really, really poor. Mount's not got a goal or assist. He does try. There's a good work ethic there, but and I suppose part of that rating, part of the blame is apportioned to United for signing him, because I just don't think he was the right midfielder that they needed at that time. So yeah, it's one of those things that, like, obviously during the international break, sometimes, and this is a good thing as well, where United won, there wasn't actually a great deal of United news over the last 2 weeks. It's been pretty calm by and large. The downside to that is that you have to be, slightly creative, and you've got to think of new things to do, features, opinion pieces. But given it's we're a third of the way into the season, it seemed fair to do a ratings of the season so far. I suspect the next one will be in the March international break. So hopefully there'll be a few better ratings.
Yeah, if there's ones and twos still in March, then we very much have a problem on our hands.
Yeah, it's back to the Solskjaer Rangnick days, I think.
Very much, very much. Hopefully there's a challenge for the players. Get yourselves up to 5 and 6s by March, please, lads. That is all for now. Thank you today, Samuel.
Thank you, Ty.
We'll be back with you on Monday to look back on United's trip to Goodison Park and look ahead to the trip to Istanbul. Remember to like us, review us, subscribe to us, whatever you want to do. Give us our rating to the season so far, as long as it's 5 out of 5. If it's not, just keep it to yourself, please. And that's all for now. We'll be back and speak to you on Monday.